Hey guys, today I wanted to take a look at Hawkmoon in Year 2. It was my favorite weapon in Year 1. I thought it was one of the, if not the best weapon in the game. I have a Twitch emote, that's a Hawkmoon. However, with the hand cannon nerf, I wanted to play with it again to see if it still holds up. We'll start with PvE. I played with it in the hard mode raid recently, and for the most part, I think it has retained most of its power. I was one-shotting things like acolytes, which is definitely something you want to have as an ability on your hand cannon. This was with a 309 Hawkmoon and aggressive ballistics. It still has the same power in terms of damage as it did in Year 1, and while at range it might suffer, for the most part you can still engage targets at the gun's maximum power and ideal range. The War Priest might give you some trouble if you're using it as a primary weapon because of range, but it shouldn't be too bad and is good for killing acolytes. For Golgoroth, it's actually very efficient at getting rid of Cursed Thrall, one-shotting them as long as you take your time setting up. However, for Daughters and Oryx, it does not come close to Touch of Malice, but then again, nothing really does. I'm not sure I'd consider it the powerhouse weapon that it used to be for the raid, but it's mostly reliable. Its biggest problem is that I feel like you can run out of ammo so quickly, whereas other guns don't really feel like they have that problem. Most of the time it was fine, but the fact that it was even a thought in my mind was a little bit worrying. It also has a lot of very good competition now. There are so many good primary weapons out there that can do their damage as reliably as Hawkmoon could in Year 1. Even though Hawkmoon kept its massive magazine size of 13 shots, stuff like Red Death, Jade Rabbit, Zalo, Touch of Malice, and Hung Jury have all become crowd favorites and overall feel more reliable, maybe because you're not all in on every single shot. Missing a part of a pulse rifle burst isn't as brutal as missing a hand cannon shot, and if you're not getting headshots with a hand cannon, it's basically a waste of time. In stuff like heroic strikes and even the Nightfall, Hawkmoon is still a very capable weapon, and due to all of the enemies in strikes, ammo should rarely be a problem, although it should be monitored. My concern with the weapon, however, is in PvP. Now, I realize that hand cannons were nerfed in 2.0, but man, Hawkmoon, and by extension, all other hand cannons, feel horribly inconsistent. I struggled to play well or with any sort of consistency whatsoever. Shots that I normally feel like I would have gotten in Year 2 ended up not connecting at all now. The stickiness that Hawkmoon used to have doesn't feel like it's there anymore. You now need to be much more aware of the distance between you and your target, as anything outside of auto rifle range will probably end up with no damage at all. In 6v6, things get too chaotic, and with pulse rifles reigning supreme at both hand cannon ranges, auto rifle ranges, and beyond, there aren't many reasons to go out and use a hand cannon. And if Hawkmoon is this inconsistent, I can't imagine how other hand cannons are faring. Rushing shotgunners tended to be a large problem as well. Without a luck in the chamber proc or a headshot, it was incredibly difficult to kill a rushing shotgunner, although I feel like that's not a Hawkmoon exclusive problem. However, in 3v3, I found it to be much more usable, and the same goes for Rumble. In a more intimate and controlled setting, you can have a better handle on your engagements. It's much easier to track people, you tend to stay as a group, and that allows you to have a much better time using the weapon. You're not having to deal with as many moments where you're fighting one person and then another person just comes up from nowhere and kills you. You can have a much easier time positioning yourself for an ideal engagement. If you're not in a good position, it's also much easier to run away and find a better position compared to 6v6, where you will undoubtedly come across another player ready to kill you. Overall, while Hawkmoon retained most of its PvE capabilities from Year 1, its PvP capabilities for the average player plummeted, although this was not limited just to Hawkmoon. Good players can still excel with Hawkmoon, but it is a little bit harder to do so. It takes a lot more planning and better positioning in order to be as successful as you could have been in Year 1. The meta doesn't really include hand cannons, it's obviously dominated by pulse rifles, and the hand cannon doesn't really feel like it has a place anymore. Autos are good close range, pulses are good for mid, and scouts are good for far. With fast rate of fire pulses being the norm, trying to land consistent shots on top of all of the hand cannon's problems makes for a rather annoying experience. The trade-off of using a hand cannon was that if you could land consistent, well-placed shots quickly, you would be rewarded with fast kills. Now it's much harder to land those consistent shots outside of close range, not that I'm looking for hand cannons to go back to Year 1 status. The one thing I'd like to see done with hand cannons is to just make them a more consistent experience. It felt like out of every 3 to 4 shots, one of them just wouldn't hit when you would think that it would. I don't care if my shots are going to do less damage than max, just make it actually hit and consistent. The clips I'm showing don't really do the inconsistency justice, but during my multi-hour session with the gun, this happens pretty much every game. If Hawkmoon and by extension all hand cannons are made more consistent, then I think hand cannons might be able to show back up in regular Crucible without feeling like you're holding yourself back. Anyway guys, those are my quick thoughts on the Hawkmoon thus far in year 2. While I'm glad hand cannons have taken a back seat in PvP, I hope one day they come back in a slightly better form than where they are now. What do you guys think needs to happen to hand cannons to bring them back to some level of popularity? Let's hear it in the comments. Thank you all very much for watching, and I'll see you next time.